Do we think the bill works, or do we think it doesn't work, and do we think it can be strengthened? For all of those reasons, though, I conclude my speech today, but I will be supporting the amendments laid by my right honourable friend, a member for Newark, and I will be voting for them with a certain degree of pride, because I believe in the sovereignty of this country, I believe in listening to the people of this country, and I believe in narrowing the unhealthy disconnect there is between the views of the majority of the people in immigration and where we are at the moment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Mark Alongi. Bob Seeley.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to be a bit late to this august report stage. I want to talk in general about some of these amendments, because I'm very sympathetic to a lot of them. I listen always to what our right honourable friend from Newark is saying, and I think he is incredibly eloquent on this, and also probably very right in some of the things that he says. But I'm also going to explain why I'm not going to support, always but I'm going to explain why, despite my concerns about the ECHR, I'm not going to support his amendments and those other amendments, because we are dealing with the art of the possible as well as the art of what is right and wrong. And I listened to the honourable member, my honourable friend from Ipswich, to talk about this in very apocalyptic terms. And I think he is right to say there is a great deal of angst and concern about this. In my patch, like in his, over 50% of people, according to that recent poll, wanted people sent back without a right of appeal. So I'm sympathetic towards that argument. I'm sympathetic to what the honourable member from Newark says about his concerns about the way the system will not work. But we are dealing with the art of the possible. And for me, when the honourable member for Ipswich says we need a 100% system, or we need a 100% certainty, not an 80 or 90% certainty, I get a bit concerned about that statement. Happy to give way.
Would my honourable friend give way? I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Does he recognise that we should be focusing on the practicalities of what are achievable, recognising the tensions on a very broad debate of what we can legislate for and what in reality will work within the limitations and the context, be that from the courts, be that from our colleagues in this place, but what will also work for Rwanda themselves?
Absolutely, and if the Rwandans turn around and say we've changed our minds, we are in a world of pain on this issue. And again, it's a question about, I trust the government, but I think the government has been naive in the past on this. But to work on the basis that we, on this side of the House, are not going to trust our own government on this and give them zero credit, I think is going way too far the other direction. Now, when it... Yeah.
Sir Roger, my old friend's making a series of very important points. Does he agree with me that one of the reasons why our constituents are concerned to see this bill pass has been the enormous impact that very high levels of migration have had on local government finance? And representing a local authority which is an island, one of the 31 in the southeast of England that volunteered to be asylum dispersal areas, does he agree that other parts of the country might do well to step up to the plate too?
I think he makes a very good point, and I think other countries should do well to step up to the plate. Thank you for that comment. Back to what my honourable friend from Ipswich was saying about an 80 or 90 versus 100% solution. As far as I see, there are 4 options, there are 4 outcomes for today, and I want to discuss them, if I may, in brief detail. Firstly, that this bill works in a wonderful way and everything is perfect. Do I think that's likely? Well, I hope it is. I live in hope. I share... I'm so sorry, thank you. I share his concern that maybe it won't. The option two is that some of the legal appeals work, some of the legal appeals don't work, but we begin to get the planes moving sort of this summer. It's a reasonable success. We are heading in the right direction with other measures. Option 3, it doesn't work. I will give way in 1 second. Option 3 is that it doesn't work. We get some brownie points for trying, but it's a bad outcome. Option 4, we vote down the bill today. There are no flights at all. The left are in clover. The Liberal elite will be smiling all the way to the next election. There will be 100 colleagues on this side of the House return, and there will be nobody to challenge woke, there will be nobody to challenge large-scale illegal immigration whatsoever. I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I mean, I think that what would make the Liberal elite the happiest would be to see this bill strangled in the courts because of its weaknesses. That would make them the happiest. And also, does my honourable friend, does he vote? What does he think about the amendments put forward by my honourable friend, the member for Newark, who perhaps knows his issue better than anybody else?
Makes 2 points. Firstly, about the happiness of the Liberal elites. I think my answer to that is he is giving a subjective opinion about what he thinks they would love. Actually, what they would love most of all is this bill to die tonight. We have to get this bill through to give us any form of chance. Now, 4 options, as I say, that it works perfectly. It may not. Option 2, that it is likely to work in part. We can live with that. Option 3, it fails. That's bad. We are trying. Option 4, we kill the bill tonight. We could all go and look for new jobs. Exactly. Right? So that is what we are. That is what we are facing. I want to see the honourable gentleman and many other people returned. But what we need to be doing is to make sure that we give the people the best chance of delivering on this. And the best chance of us delivering on this is to try to push the government in a conservative direction. I give the honourable gentleman that. But once we think the government's gone as far as it can, and I'm on the same side of the argument on this, but I'm different, my differentiation is that I will give them the benefit of doubt to get this through third reading. We have to get this bill through, even if he doesn't vote against, but he's willing to abstain. At least it will be an improvement. I'd love to give it. Thank you.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Is it also important that we all note that if this bill is killed off at third reading, there is no other opportunity to bring another bill back to address this issue within this Parliament? So we will be stuck in the current situation going into the elections.
I thank my right honourable friend for that very important point. I would just note that on the WhatsApp group where we were chatting about this earlier, one of our colleagues from the North East posted the idea that we could have a new bill, that a new bill would be written. I'm finding that to be truly living in la-la land, because the idea that everybody on this house, on this side of the house, would agree to a new bill once we've killed this bill is for the birds. It's this bill or no bill. It's this bill or no chance. So I think we have to face the reality. I would also, because my honourable member, my honourable friend from Ipswich, spoke very eloquently about the ECHR, I just want to touch on the ECHR as well, because it's important. I'm not a fan of the ECHR. Our freedoms, our liberties, they're not because of the ECHR. They're not because a Bulgarian judge gets out of bed at 2 a.m. in the morning to strike down democratically elected law. There is nobody in this House who is as willing for me to rewrite our relationship with the ECHR. Now, this bill is not the time to do it. This is an argument for our manifesto. But if he was to suggest to me that what we need to do is to make the ECHR advisory, so we fundamentally change our relationship, that a vote in Parliament can overrule the ECHR, he will find no bigger champion of that than myself. And in the same way that if we were looking to review the Human Rights Act, I'm as bored as him of hearing ministers saying, and they don't really do it in private, we can't do this because of the Human Rights Act. I pull my hair out. We're in government. We should be changing the Human Rights Act if we don't like it. We shouldn't be using it as an excuse for inaction. Yeah.
Thank the honourable member for giving way and listening with interest to his points. As one of the people who actually would be seen as the architects of the Rwanda scheme, along with the member for Corby and the right honourable member for Witham, I would have preferred to see this bill with the member for Stone. And I hear many of the points made by my honourable friend from Newark. But whilst I would prefer to see it go further, it was a bill that could still work.
I agree. Thank you, sir. If there was, I thank my honourable friend for his comments. If there was a chance for moving further, yes. But I don't think there is. And I think the issue is it's this bill or no bill, and it's this bill or no chance. So to come back to what my honourable friend from Ipswich was saying about the ECHR, yes, I accept what he's saying, and I agree with it. So let's reorientate our relationship with the ECHR. Let's reorientate our relationship with these European laws. Let's look again. I don't like judicial activism any more than anyone else on this side of the House. Judicial activism is the enemy of democratic accountability if you have foreign judges who are willing to get up in the middle of the night and overrule law passed in this House by this democratic body, answerable and sovereign to the British people. So let's talk about changing the ECHR, but we should not be doing it now.
Will you give way? On precisely that point, isn't there a further addition to his argument, which is a practical one, which is that overriding the ECHR in this instance, as opposed to following a broader debate, may lead to the Rwandan side being less enthusiastic and pulling out from the deal, and therefore practically sending us back to square one.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. It's good to see him. So thank you very much indeed. Personally, when it comes to, I think they called Amendment 39, if I understand correctly, the pyjama amendment, where judges get out of bed in the middle of the night to strike down democratically. I don't even know why our government is still agreeing to abide by these amendments, because as far as I can see, it should be a matter of principle that Amendment 39 amendments are advisory until such time as we wish to adopt them. So I don't even know why the government, maybe the government has some movement or something that it wishes to tell us about on Amendment 39. It would be wonderful if they did. But as part of this conversation, and I think we are in a period of flux, as our electorates rightly become more concerned about issues related to crime, about issues related to sovereignty, about issues related to legal and illegal immigration, we start to talk about our relationship with the European Human Rights Conventions. I'm up for that. But now is not necessarily the time to do that. But one final point, if I may, sir.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He's making an extremely important point. And before he moves on to the last part of his speech, I want to press him a little bit further on the ECHR and the elements that he's commented, as well as the comments made by my honourable friend from Ipswich. Does he recognise that some of the fundamental changes that have been asked for in some of the amendments this evening are so great that they in themselves warrant a separate piece of legislation, even if they were to come forward, so that this House could consider them in full and in detail, rather than being attached onto an extremely important bill in itself, and where they could undermine the objectives as well as detract from the wider debate that they're trying to make in terms of the ECHR.
I thank my right honourable, thank you, sir. I thank my right honourable friend very much for that point. I quite agree. I think we're in danger, sir, of reverse engineering a whole load of opinions on the ECHR into a single bill, which is influenced by the ECHR, but is fundamentally about something else. I would like to see greater debate about the ECHR. I would like to see greater debate about the relationship between our laws and what we do about international conventions, being mindful and being respectful of them, whilst at the same time understanding that our freedoms, our privileges, our rights as Britons, for me, do not come from post-war European documents. We should remember where the ECHR came from. It was effectively written in part by ourselves to help Europe recover from the appalling destruction caused by fascism, but also the threat of totalitarian socialism and totalitarian communism. Since then, we've seen what was a good document. In part, it was a good document, sir, because it was written by ourselves to help Europe recover, to help get its legal and political dignity back. What we've seen is that it's been a target of politicised judicial activism. And I believe something which is the target of politicised judicial activism should not necessarily be overruling our own traditions. And there, I do find a tendency.
Sir Roger, the honourable member for the Isle of Wight is once again making some very powerful points. Does he recognise that the number of interim measures that are handed down in respect of the UK is extremely small? In fact, in some years there are no interim measures that are granted in respect of the UK. But that nonetheless, we do need to review the way in which measures which are not specifically described in the original documents that underpin the ECHR have evolved. And therefore it is right that, although it remains absolutely something which is non-binding and a decision for a government minister how to respond to those, that we need to ensure that our courts and our system understands the role that Parliament expects them to play.
Again, thank you, Sir Roger, and I again thank my right honourable friend. I think he makes a very valuable point, and one that I was just about to come on to. Why is it that some people in this country, some political groups, generally on the left, idealise international courts as if they are great fonts of wisdom, when for me, a lot of their judgments are highly political, highly tendentious. They seem to be studied disrespect. They are a sort of an exercise in studied disrespect of the English common law, which for me is one of the great wonders of human civilization and human achievement, Sir Roger, along with monotheism and one or two other things. That these things are extraordinary achievements, and we seem to allow these international courts to overrule them as if these international courts are great fonts of sort of Olympian wisdom, when all these sort of great judges from on high, who frankly do not come from traditional judicial systems and judicial traditions anything like as strong or as noble of ourselves.
Would my friend give way? I've been agreeing with the basic thrust that it's this bill or nothing. But can I just say to him gently in relation to the European Court of Human Rights, for example, that if he looks carefully at the case law of the European Court in Strasbourg, British common law traditions have in fact had a significant impact on the jurisprudence of that court. It does not follow the pure civil law system of the continent. Those who've served on the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe will know that. And actually, it's moved to a hybrid system, largely because of the influence of British jurists.
I thank my honourable friend, and he makes an excellent point, and considering he's an eminent lawyer, and I frankly am not. I am, Sir Roger, tempted to say I will stop digging, but I would just say one point in my answer to my honourable friend, Sir Roger. Yes, I accept that point, and I think he's absolutely right that we have had an influence. But it is also, for me, that I have, from what I've seen and read, there has been an influence also of a far more rationalist system on our own common law. And I do not find the impact on EU law and EU casework on our system to have been entirely beneficial and entirely helpful.
I'm glad he's making this point because, and I don't blame him because it's easy to align the two. EU law and the operation of the Luxembourg court is a very different discipline from Strasbourg. That court is enjoined to interpret EU law, and what it says is gospel, and we have to follow it. That's not the case with Strasbourg. When he talks about the case law, you know, and I'm not going to put him on the spot too much, but name the cases that actually are the problem. Where are they? I can help him. The Hearst case, the prisoner voting case, was a pretty poor judgment. And it was bad. It was a bad judgment.
You're not allowed to use that one.
So there's one. there was another one about whole life sentences. There was another one about whole life sentences, which we sorted out in the Court of Appeal. Problem solved. The Abu Qatada case, that was a long saga. We sorted that out. Those are really the three problems we've had in the 10 years. That doesn't amount to a hill of beans.
I'm delighted my right honourable friend has intervened, because those are exactly the 3 points that I was about to mention to completely make my case. And I thank him for letting me do it for me. But I accept the point he makes. But I also accept for the fact that we are a sovereign parliament and our relationship, Sir Roger, has changed for many of these institutions, and I don't think necessarily our relationship reflects that change. So I will leave it at that, but I am accepting not only the points that he said, but also the wisdom in which he says it. And I think at that point, Sir Roger, unless I've got any more interventions, I'm going to be winding up. So thank you so much.
Order. Just before we proceed, and I call Jerome Mayhew, can I gently say is not escaped the notice of the chair. A significant number of members have wandered in after many hours of debate during which they have not been here and then sought to participate. Technically, the chair has no power to control that, but understand we deprecate it. I take a very dim view of it as bad manners. I hope that's very clearly understood. The honourable gentleman, the member for Ipswich, who's popped out for a few minutes, sat in his place for 5 hours waiting to speak. I believe that any other member that wishes to speak in a debate should afford the House the same courtesy. Jerome May.
Thank you very much, Sir Roger. And I should start my speech with my personal apology for not having been here for the full course of this debate. The reason in my case, well, I very much wanted to be actually, but I had duties in Westminster Hall for 2 debates during the course of the afternoon, which prevented me from taking a full role in this debate. But I'm very grateful, Sir Roger, for you nevertheless agreeing to call me in what is obviously a very important debate. I have heard sufficient, however, Sir Roger, of the debate, the back and forth, that there has been criticism from the benches opposite that this bill goes too far. And there are even some words of advice and criticism on these benches that it perhaps doesn't go far enough. So I think before we get down into the nitty-gritty of the amendments, it is worth going back to base principles, look at the fundamentals as to why this bill is necessary in the first place. Because it is, without doubt, it must be the case for every single member of this House, irrespective of their party loyalties, they must agree that the current position in relation to small boats crossing the Channel is deeply wrong and has to be addressed. It's just not fair what is happening at the moment, because the small boats programme that we see in our television screens and have done for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, ever since we plugged the last gap in our external borders by making it harder for illegal immigrants to get onto lorries or to get on the Eurostar. That's going back almost a decade, in fact. The business model is such that where you restrict one point of illegal access, the model will seek out the next weakest point in the border of our country. And right now, that is small boats crossing the Channel. But these are not individuals buying up dinghies and setting off across the Channel. We all know that this is a massive commercial opportunity for organised criminal gangs making masses and masses of money, millions of pounds, tens of millions of pounds, from the misery of others. This is money going into organised crime, which then finds a vent in other crime, both in Europe and in our own country. And it is criminal gangs who are imposing violence on the very vulnerable people that are then exploited by them in the crossing of the Channel. So it must be right that any responsible government would take steps to challenge a set of circumstances where very vulnerable people are being exposed to risk and violence, not just the risk of death crossing the Channel. And the honourable member from Doncaster, if I heard him correctly, said there were 5 deaths just last week from this very dangerous process. But there's also the violence of the criminal gangs imposing their will on these migrants. Yes, I'll happily give way.
Thank you very much for the intervention, accepting my intervention. Does the honourable member not agree that the massive amount of money wasted on the Rwanda plan would be better spent on creating safe legal routes and clearing the backlog so that those fleeing persecution can build a better life in a country proud of its humanitarian actions, as so many have in my constituency of Ealing Southall?
I'm very grateful to the honourable member for Ealing South for his contribution. And he allows me to highlight the success that the government has made in reducing the backlog, as made clear by the Prime Minister in Prime Minister's questions early on today. But he's also right, and I don't shy away from the point that the Rwanda scheme is expensive. And if it was to be calculated as cost spent per person flown to Rwanda, it would be a very high cost indeed per individual. When the scheme gets up and running. I will come to the honourable member, the honourable friend in a moment. But that is not the point of Rwanda. It's not that every single person who comes across borders illegally will then be shipped to Rwanda. The idea of the Rwanda scheme is to act as an effective deterrent. So you send a few people to Rwanda the scheme, the criminal gangs, and more importantly, the people who are paying large sums of money to the criminal gangs, get the message that this course of action, paying money to the criminal gangs, being ferried across the channel, is no longer an effective way of getting here. And they will go, I will in a moment, but I will give way there and then to you after that. That it is not an effective means of gaining access to the United Kingdom. If that is successful, and I believe it will be when this bill is passed, then that is a very sound use of money, because it's not just preventing the additional cost to social society in this country and to the services, physical services, but it is protecting the lives of some of the most vulnerable people in the world, whilst righting a gross unfairness in the approach to our asylum system. So I'm really grateful for that intervention. I will give way again.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I think he's making an extremely important point, particularly in response to the intervention received in relation to the money and the costs involved. Clearly, he's made a powerful point in response, but is he also aware that the President of Rwanda has reported in the media today that the UK could well be refunded if all of that resource is not used because of challenges along the way?
Well, I'm very grateful again for that intervention from my own friend. I wasn't aware of that, but it adds grist to the mill and strength to the arguments of the government to proceed with the Rwanda policy, and I will give way again.
Will he give way, and can I pay tribute to him in making his speech? And he took the intervention from the other side of the House, which pointed about safe and legal routes. One of the biggest problems we have with the system is we haven't heard how many, where from, and what these safe and legal routes would look like. There are 100 million people supposedly displaced across the world. So if 1% of them even decided to come to the UK, that's 1 million people that have to be processed and found a country. If we do this as a one individual country when it's a worldwide problem, we create and facilitate not only a problem in our shores, but in the shores where you open those centres. And does he believe that there is a plan from the opposition over where these would be, how would we man these centres, how much they would cost, and what all those safe and legal routes look like, especially when people are leaving from France, when France is a safe country?
I'm very grateful for that intervention as well. The phrase safe and legal routes, it feels right, doesn't it? It feels like we should be in favour of safe and legal routes. And speaking personally, I do think they are part of a solution, a wider solution to immigration policy in the future. But the Honourable Member for Bosworth referenced that there may be up to 100 million people seeking asylum currently in the world. I think from memory, the figure from the United Nations report is actually 108 million people. I will give way there and then there, but I will come back and answer that question.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend giving way, and he's making an excellent speech. Of course, this bill is dealing with a lot of the pull factors, or at least references or infers approaching those in a more constructive and positive way. But on the push factors, and he sits on the Council of Europe delegation, I know, does he agree with me that this domestic policy should not perhaps be disaggregated from foreign policy and our overseas aid policies? So, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa or in the Sahel, let's take the Sahel as an example, where the French have recently exited or are about to exit, where the UK does have an important counter-terrorism presence, that where we have states that are fragile states becoming failed states, that they are causing more push factors. Also, there are some adversaries of this country, such as Russia, through its proxies in Africa, trying to disrupt democratically elected governments, again in order to create a crisis of migration. Quite happy to see people coming up through North Africa and coming into Europe. So does he agree with me, given his international experience, that we have to have a more holistic view of this policy in the context of global foreign policy?
I'm very grateful. I mean, those are excellent points, and it is one of the reasons why the merging of the development department with the FCO, as it then was, become the FCDO, has the potential at least to link those two areas of policy in a way that the Honourable Member describes. The challenge here is very substantial. I will come on in a minute, but I've got a few answers to give before I give way again. The challenge with push factors is that they've only just started. You're quite right. The honourable member is quite right to reference malign actors such as Russia in the short and medium term. But there is a much bigger factor which we need in this House to consider over the next 20 to 50 years, and that is climate change. Because the likelihood is that there will be very, very significant mass migration from sub-Saharan Africa at a time when large areas of countries, perhaps entire countries, may become functionally uninhabitable through water scarcity and heat. Then what we've seen currently in push factors will be nothing to what we see in the future. So it behoves us as a responsible government to design and implement now an immigration policy that is fit for purpose, not just for now, but the future. Returning to the point of my honourable friend Bosworth, you might have to remind me what it was. No, not the point.
How many places, how many centres?
Actually, rather than go with that, I'm going to give way to the honourable member and then on. Sorry.
I'm giving way. I was just going to make the point that, would you agree? I do find it frustrating, Sir Roger, when especially the opposition benches talk about the need for safe and legal routes. As a statement of fact, there were 10 safe and legal routes into the UK in the past decade. There are currently 9 safe and legal routes into the UK, which have been responsible for 50,000 refugees coming from, of those safe and legal routes are responsible for 50,000 refugees coming to this country from 2015, and overall, the numbers of refugees or people granted asylum in this country from 2015 to 2016 is a number approaching the population of Manchester now. You're talking about something in the upper 400s, twice the size of the city of Portsmouth. So when people talk about the need for safe and legal routes, I mean, I'm just assuming that none of the benches opposite have any clue what they're talking about. Would you care to comment?
I agree certainly with that last sentiment. We've had very significant and welcomed. We've been a place of safety for I think it's about 80,000 from Ukraine. We've opened our arms to Hong Kong, British nationals of Hong Kong descent, some 250,000 from there. We've got the Syria programme, which is, from memory again, about 20,000, as well as the Afghan resettlement programme, which was about 18 to 20,000. All of these have been safe and legal routes. And the big difference, Sir Roger, is that the British government, representing the British people, decided that those were the people we wanted to help. They were the most vulnerable, and we took the decision, not criminal gangs from abroad. Final, I will give way, but then I will make some progress.
I'm very grateful. And it's exactly that, the British people decided. Does he believe that it's right that the government is consulting on asking local council authorities how many asylum seekers and refugees they can support, come up with a number that Parliament will then have a decision on to vote on, which is exactly the right thing to say, to be pragmatic and practical while warm and welcoming to those who need that help?
The honourable member for Bosworth makes another very good point. One of the most important things that we must not forget in this place is that our asylum policy depends on the support and acceptance of our people. And if we have a policy that is rejected by people, that they feel is unfair, that doesn't represent their views, then we really run the very genuine risk of throwing the whole baby of asylum and welcoming people with vulnerabilities from around the world out with the bathwater. And this bill helps to maintain a welcoming stance to asylum seekers which are decided on by the government, whilst maintaining public support for the policy as a whole. And I'm going to give way over there, and then I will conclude.
Just to shed a little light on this to help him here, as the author of the Safe and Legal Routes Amendment in the Illegal Migration Bill, he is quite right. We have very generous safe and legal route schemes already. The trouble is they are mostly limited to set groups of people, and the importance of the schemes that the government are working on is for those people who are genuine asylum seekers, genuinely fleeing persecution, war zones or whatever, can be accommodated in some way. But it will be subject to a cap. So although there are potentially hundreds of thousands and millions who may want to come here, The illegal migration bill sets a cap for safe and legal routes, so it's the number of people that we can cope with, but they're the right people, the most vulnerable people we can take in, and then separate out them from those people who have no credible case for coming to the United Kingdom, which is why this bill is so important.
With every point that my honourable friend made, we've got real anger on the doorstep. So I'm very lucky. I represent the seat of Broaden and Fakenham in Norfolk. I was knocking on doors just before Christmas. Of the 100 or so doors I knocked on, I had 20 conversations, decent conversations with constituents of mine. This is rural Norfolk. 19 of those 20 conversations raised illegal migration as one of the key issues. That is the reality of the views of the people who I represent, and we would be mad in this House if we did not accurately reflect those views. My final intervention.
Sir Roger, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Would he join me in paying tribute to the work of the East of England Local Government Association and the East of England Strategic Migration Partnership, who've done such amazing work supporting the resettlement of British passport holders from Hong Kong, Syrians coming through the Syrian resettlement scheme, through Homes for Ukraine? And does he agree with me that it'd be much more acceptable to those constituencies referred to hear that those individuals that come to the UK through arrangements agreed with local authorities who have the capacity to support them, rather than, as I witnessed when I visited the jungle camp in Calais, done by a rate sheet of smugglers? The more you can pay, the more likely you are to be able to break into the UK through a back door.
My honourable friend is exactly right. That my constituents are generous-minded, they are welcoming, but they don't like the unfairness. They feel that this is inherently unfair. So we've got young men aged 18 to 40 typically. Where are the women? Where are the children? We've got young men 18 to 40 who are relatively rich because they've been able to pay £3,000 to £5,000 to the smugglers, or worse still, will be indented and end up in slave labour trying to pay back a debt that will never be repaid. You've got, this is a terrible situation which needs to be addressed. Now, the government has taken really effective action, and we can see that, not because I just say it, but because in the hard data that we've seen this in the last year. In a time when migration into the European Union is going up by about a third, and in Mediterranean companies by fully 80% last year, the effect of the suite of interventions that the government has already made has been so effective that it has reduced migration down in this country by 36%, over a third. That's not because of Rwanda, it's in addition to Rwanda. It's because we've increased French patrols on the coast by 40%. It's because we've been tracking down boat supply in places like Romania and removing that production from the ability of these gangs to physically get people across the channel. We've increased the raids on illegal workplaces, which were part of the pull factor for the illegal migrants. And perhaps more important than anything else, we have cut a deal with Albania, demonstrating that where the year before, I think about 20,000 people came from Albania, claimed asylum, with the returns policy, recognising that Albania is a safe country, just as Rwanda is, by the way, that the number of potential migrants coming across the channel has decreased by in excess of 90%. So if we need an example of why the Rwanda policy should work, look at Albania. Look at the results that we have already achieved, and this government, for who, I commend them for the hard work, the hard yards, the incremental gains, which have shown, we're not all the way there, but 36% reductions already and counting. And if we add on what we propose in this bill for the Rwanda relocation deterrence, I think this is going to really make an enormous difference. And we've heard from government lawyers that the current process is likely to reduce the number of appeals by 99.5%. Yes, there may be the odd one who continues to appeal, but that last-minute process of repeated appeals, that will be removed. And that's why I don't feel the necessity to support the proposed amendments in this bill, and I will be supporting the government.
Michael Thomas.
Sir Roger, thank you very much indeed. With your permission, may I, on behalf of His Majesty's Government, pass on my sincere condolences to the family and friends of Sir Tony Lloyd, the former Member of Parliament for...
Order. I'm sorry to have to interrupt on such a sensitive issue, but Mr. Speaker intends to make a statement about that later.
I'm very grateful indeed for that guidance, and thank you for that. May I start, therefore, by turning to those who have contributed during the course of this debate. May I start with my honourable friend, the member for East Worthing and Shoreham, thanking him for his powerful points, his challenging, forensic, learned even points that he made. He once again questioned what solutions are being offered by the party opposite. He's right to do so. Answer came there none. May I thank my right honourable friend, the member for South Holland and the Deepings. As so often, he debates in poetry, and I'm going to come back to some of the remarks he made in due course. May I also thank the chairman of the Select Committee, the right honourable member for Kingston upon Hull North. She was right, and she ensured she didn't make a second reading speech, but she did mention one or two other matters and amendments, and I'll turn to those in due course. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Ruislip, Norwood and Pinner, always thoughtful, measured, and so often right, and I'm grateful to him for his contributions and also for his interventions during the course of the latter stages of this debate. The honourable member for Glasgow Central cited Robert Burns and asked what he would have to say to the benches opposite. And my honourable friend and neighbour, the member for North Dorset, rather cheekily, from a sedentary position, suggested that Robert Burns might say to the benches opposite, "How can I join you?" That wasn't the gist or the thrust of her speech, but it was a cheeky intervention that I enjoyed nonetheless. I'll turn to her amendments in due course. My honourable friend, the member for Don Valley, I listened carefully, as I always do, and I hope to be able to turn to some of the points that he made and hopefully allay some of the fears that he has. He said that it sometimes happens that the chamber empties or isn't as full when he speaks. It sometimes happens to ministers as well, but not everyone is back when the minister is responding to their contributions. But he is here, and he is in his seat, and I'm grateful to him for sitting through so much of this debate and also for his characteristic courtesy. My honourable friend, the member for Ipswich, spoke with passion, as he always does, and I'm grateful to him for his contribution. My honourable friend, the member for the Isle of Wight, again spoke at some length. I'm grateful to him for that. He delved into the principles of the ECHR, and he was enticed by my right honourable and learned friend to make some pronouncements on some of those judgments. And I thought that was a little bit mean of my right honourable and learned friend, the member for South Swindon. But he did at least proffer one suggestion, namely the case of Hurst, and I'm grateful to him for that. My honourable friend, the member for Broadland, again, I'm grateful to him for his intervention and for being on duty not only in Westminster Hall, but also here in this chamber. Sir Roger, the course of this debate has been constructive. On the whole, I agree. It has been broadly thoughtful, instructive. We've had references to scripture. We've had an exchange on that. And as a lawyer, it was a joy indeed to hear the word otios. And we didn't hear it once. We didn't hear it twice. We heard it several times. We once even heard otios with bells on, from my honourable friend, the member for Bromley and Chislehurst, and I'm grateful to him for that. I've not heard that expression before, but I feel sure that it is a legal reference that I must have brushed past in my youth. We've also heard about box sets. We heard that from my right honourable friend, the member for Newark. We heard about that from the honourable gentleman, the member for Glasgow North, and I'll need to do a bit more research on that, I think. And we also touched on ECHR membership, although rightly, my right honourable friend, the member for Newark, said this was not the place to have that full debate. But he set out some of the parameters for the future debates that I'm sure we will have. Sir Roger, may I turn firstly, please, to Clause 1. This clause sets out the rationale of the bill. It sets out the legal obligations and how the treaty to which the government of Rwanda have agreed addresses the concerns that were set out by the Supreme Court. Amendments 39, Amendments 40, 41 and 42, tabled by the honourable member for Glasgow Central. We heard her address those points. And also Amendments 43 and 44, tabled by the honourable member for Aberdeen South. They seek to exclude the core of these provisions. And once again, the Honourable Member was very clear about her intention in that regard. But the treaty is binding in international law. In accordance with Rwandan law, the treaty will become domestic law in Rwanda on ratification. And, Sir Roger, that's set out in detail and it's confirmed in Article 3(6) of the treaty. It rules out anyone relocated to Rwanda being removed from there, except to the United Kingdom. That is an important part of the treaty set out in Article 10(3). And this is regardless of whether the individual is found to be a refugee or to have another humanitarian protection need. This removes the risk of refoulement. Everyone relocated to Rwanda will receive the same treatment. Those with refugee status, those with a humanitarian protection need, or even without that status, will be able to stay in Rwanda and receive the same rights and treatment. This addresses head-on the concern that the Supreme Court set out. The asylum decision-making process is being significantly reformed. An Annex B of the treaty, and if I have time, I might turn to the details of that in due course, but Annex B contains strengthened monitoring arrangements to ensure, and there are also strengthened monitoring arrangements to ensure adherence to the obligations. I'm very grateful indeed to my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Kenilworth and Southern. I'm very grateful for his engagement. I don't believe that his concerns are right. He said offensive or otiose. I would suggest neither is right, and I hope to be able to reassure him with what I say now, because Clause 1 makes clear that Parliament is sovereign and that its acts are valid notwithstanding any interpretation of international law. And he will understand that I'll come back to that notwithstanding terminology that has been so contentious, perhaps, in recent history. But what it doesn't mean is that doing so legislates away our international obligations. The purpose of the bill is to say that on the basis of the treaty and the evidence before it, Parliament believes that those obligations have been met. It doesn't mean that we do not care whether or not they have been met. He mentioned dualism. He was right to do so. The parts of this clause to which my right honourable and learned friends' amendments are directed, they do no more than make clear what we mean by a safe country, which is a key definition applied to Rwanda, namely that the United Kingdom can remove to that country in compliance with its international obligations, and that Rwanda will not remove anyone in breach of any international law. My right honourable and learned friend also mentioned, as a former Attorney General, the Law Officers Convention. I was very grateful to him for that, for so often in this chamber it goes unnoticed. It is an important convention, and as a former law officer myself, I abide by it very strictly, as I know he does as well, and I'm grateful to him for reminding the House of that fact. May I turn to the amendments tabled and the speech of my right honourable and learned friend, the member for South Swindon. I'm grateful again to him for his contributions, not just yesterday, but today as well. It's important that the will of Parliament is made clear, and that following the mammoth efforts between our government and the government of Rwanda, the obligations that we have agreed are fully set out. This clause, Clause 1, ensures that it's crystal clear that it's Parliament that has considered and concluded that Rwanda is a safe country. I know my right honourable friend's concern about this sort of clause. He will know that it's not unique and that it's not dissimilar to the Illegal Migration Act and the Clause 1 that was there as well. And I suspect he's encouraging me not to pray that in aid, but it is a fact all the same that it is there. It is not unprecedented to have a clause such as Clause 1 in the bill. May I turn, Sir Roger, please, to Clause 3. The United Kingdom has a long-standing tradition of ensuring that rights and liberties are protected domestically and of fulfilling our international human rights obligations. We remain committed to that position, and we will ensure that our laws continue to be fit for purpose and work for the people of the United Kingdom. Though some of the provisions in the bill are novel, the government is satisfied that the bill can be implemented in line with the Convention rights. However, it has been clear that people will seek to frustrate their removal by any means. Therefore, this bill goes further than the Illegal Migration Act taken through by my right honourable friends, the members for Newark and for Fareham. As we have heard, that bill only excludes Section 3, or it disapplies Section 3. This bill and this clause disapplies further elements of the Human Rights Act. And the effect is that the duty under Section 6(1) of the Human Rights Act is disapplied from any public authority, including any court or tribunal that is taking a decision that's based on the duty under Clause 2 of the bill to treat the Republic of Rwanda as safe. May I turn directly to my right honourable friend, the member for Newark, and for his amendments, firstly his amendments 11 and 18, if I may. The bill, he's right, does not seek to disapply Section 4. It does not, in fact, disapply the Declaration of Incompatibility provisions in Section 4. This is the only substantive remedy against the conclusive presumption that Rwanda is safe. Retaining declarations of incompatibility is important, but of course, the final say on this matter will remain rightly with Parliament and with the government, because of Section 4, subsection 6 of the Human Rights Act makes it clear that a declaration cannot affect the operation or the validity of domestic legislation. I will give way.
I think he makes a very important point there about the extent to which the courts should and can intervene on issues relating to the compatibility of primary legislation with the ECHR. The Section 4 procedure allows the courts to express a view, but doesn't trespass directly upon the functions of this place in order with dealing with the problem. It simply gives Parliament an opportunity to then rectify any situation, or not, frankly. Does he agree with me that Section 4 is a much better mechanism for the courts to use than the clunky and inelegant and sometimes very problematic Section 3 procedure?
Indeed, to my right honourable learned friend, I heard what he said about Section 3, and I agree with him wholeheartedly and entirely. He's absolutely right to describe it as clunky, and it has been disapplied in this bill as well as the Illegal Migration Act. But may I say directly to my right honourable friend, the member for Newark, that I accept entirely his comments when he says that he is here to help the government, that he believes passionately in this policy, and he has had several very frank, open and honest conversations with me about that, both in this chamber and outside. I'm very grateful to him for the way that he put his points so ably and so clearly. But the disapplication of these sections within the bill significantly reduces the extent to which public authorities are bound to act as a consequence of the Convention rights. May I turn to some other amendments, Sir Roger? May I turn to Clause 5 and the further amendments tabled by my right honourable friend? Because this bill makes clear in Clause 5 that it is only for a Minister of the Crown, and only they alone, to determine whether to comply with an interim measure of the Strasbourg courts. It also makes it clear that the domestic courts may not have regard to the existence of any interim measure when considering any domestic application flowing from a decision to remove a person to Rwanda in accordance with the treaty. What happened with the Rwanda flight in June 2022 was frustrating, as many honourable members have mentioned. It was a deeply flawed process and raised issues of natural justice, but changes have been made since then, not least in the Illegal Migration Act. And since then, the Strasbourg Court has, on the 13th of November, announced the outcome of its review into the rules concerning interim measures. And the changes include the naming of judges, and that interim measures should be communicated as formal decisions. And it confirms the existing practice in parties being able to request reconsideration of a decision in the rules. And the United Kingdom has responded formally to that court's consultation. Sir Roger, I know that colleagues have raised concerns that assuming this bill passes and succeeds in closing down the vast majority of individual claims, our deterrent will be frustrated by a Rule 39 interim measure. May I say directly to my right honourable and honourable friends that I understand those concerns. No one who was here in June 2022 and saw the last Rwanda plane left on the tarmac can fail to understand the importance of fixing this issue. That is why the Prime Minister has been clear that he will not let a foreign court block these flights. We simply cannot let an international court dictate our border security and stop us from establishing a deterrent. And that is I must complete this point. I must complete this point. That is why we have inserted into Clause 5 of this bill, which is crystal clear, that it is for ministers and ministers alone to decide whether to comply with Rule 39 injunctions. We would not have inserted Clause 5 if we were not prepared to use it, and I can confirm to the House that we can and will lawfully use that power if the circumstances arise. The discretion is there, but we go further still, and we confirm that the civil service must implement any such decision. Today, the Permanent Secretary for the Home Office has confirmed that if we receive a Rule 39, instead of deferring removal immediately, as currently is the practice, officials will refer the Rule 39 to the Minister, not to be too grandiose, but Sir Roger, in this case to me, for an immediate decision. As the Cabinet Office has confirmed, that is the responsibility of civil servants under the Civil Service Code to deliver that decision. Sir Roger, colleagues have confirmation that we have the power, we would use the power, and the civil service will give effect to it. If a plane is sitting on that runway, this government will not stop until it takes off. And we all know what the opposition would do. They would campaign for it to be grounded. Will my honourable and right I will give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you, Sir Roger. I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. With the point he's just referred to, he said that there will be circumstances in which we will ignore these pyjama injunctions. What are the circumstances of which the government will not ignore and therefore comply with them?
I couldn't have been clearer. There is the confirmation that we have the power, we would use the power, and the civil service will give effect to it. May I respond directly to my right honourable? I won't. I don't have the time. May I respond directly to my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Fareham? She spoke powerfully, as she always does, and I always listen carefully to what she says. She set out a number of cases, Sir Roger, where medical reasons were cited in court, medical arguments were presented, which she said frustrated the will of this place. But in fact, in Section 39 of the Illegal Migration Act, the very act that my right honourable and learned friend took through this place with my right honourable friend, the member for Newark, addresses that exact point about medical records and medical evidence. The following, Sir Roger, are examples of harm that do not constitute serious and irreversible harm, namely where the standard of healthcare available to the person in the relevant country is lower than that available in the United Kingdom. It is there. It is in the statute. It is in the bill that we passed last year. Any pain or distress resulting from a medical treatment that is available to a person in the United Kingdom not being available to a person in the relevant country is not, does not and will not constitute serious and irreversible harm. My right honourable and learned friend is right to be concerned about that, but those concerns have been addressed and have been met in the legislation that we have passed and in the legislation that is mirrored in this bill that we are taking through today. May I turn to Clause 8 and the important provisions that are there? And may I address directly, please, the honourable member for Belfast East and his submissions in response to new Clause 3. Nothing in the Windsor Framework, including Article 2 or the withdrawal agreement, affects the bill's proper operation on a UK-wide basis. Any suggestion to the contrary would be to imply that the scope of the rights, safeguards and equality of opportunity chapter of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is far more expansive than was ever intended. I will not give way. We are unequivocal that that is simply not the case. And Article 2 of the Windsor Framework is not engaged. I would be happy to write further to the Honourable Gentleman and to the Right Honourable Member for Lagan Valley on this point to set out further detail. I hope I can reassure him that we have already achieved what the aim that he seeks. I will give way. He must be conscious that we are up against a very tight deadline.
On the statements he made with regard to Rule 39 and so forth, can he explain to the House how the government would be able to prevent a judicial review of the decision taken by the Minister without legislation?
My honourable friend has heard what I said on that point. I respect him and admire him. He knows the esteem that I have for him. We have a good faith disagreement on the effect of this. Clause 5 is clear. It is for a minister to decide, and a minister will decide. May I finish this point in response to the honourable member for Belfast East? I hope I can reassure him that we have already achieved the aim that he seeks. The bill will apply across the whole of the United Kingdom, in line with the application of our sovereign immigration policy across all 4 nations of the United Kingdom as a territorial whole. I am grateful to him for his kind and generous comments about me personally. I'm grateful to him for his engagement, and I will continue to engage with him on this issue. Sir Roger, we have made progress towards stopping the boats, with small boat crossings down by 1/3 in 2023. But we must do more. The only way to do this is if it is abundantly clear that illegal entry will never lead to a new life in the United Kingdom. The power of deterrence is proven beyond reasonable doubt by the success of our agreement with Albania. Sir Roger, Parliament and the British people want an end to illegal immigration, and we need a deterrent. We have a plan. We have a plan to stop the boats, and I invite all honourable and right honourable members to back it.
Order. Amendment 11 has been proposed. Mr Jenrick, do you wish to press it to a vote, or do you wish to withdraw it?
With your permission, I'd like to withdraw it, but if you are agreeable to press Amendment 23 instead.
We'll come to that in due course. Is it your pleasure that Amendment 11 be withdrawn?
Aye.
Amendment by leave withdrawn. Under the order of the House of the 12th of December, I must now put the questions necessary to bring the proceedings to a conclusion. The question is that Clause 3 stand part of the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Aye. Division, clear the lobbies.
Quickly. Sorry, Sir Roger. Thank you.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part of the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. Tell us for the ayes. Rob Logan and Aaron Bell. Tell us for the noes. Kirsty Blackman and Stephen Bonner. Lock the doors. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 339. The noes to the left, 264.
Thank you. The ayes to the right were 339. The noes to the left were 264. So the ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to Amendment 23 to Clause 5, which has been selected for separate decision. Robert Jenrick to move formally.
Beg to move.
The question is that Amendment 23 be made. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No! Division. Clear the lobby.
Amendment 23 be made. As many of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, Miriam Cates. Tellers for the noes, Rob Logan and Aaron Bell. Lock the doors. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 65. The noes to the left, 536.
The ayes to the right, 65. The noes to the left, 536. So the noes have it. The noes have it. And look, the question is that clauses 5, 6, 7 and 8 stand part of the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Aye. Division, clear the lobby. Order. If members could resume their seats, please. The question is that clauses 5, 6, 7 and 8 stand part of the bill. As many other opinions say aye. Of the contrary, no. Tell us to the ayes, Robert Largan, Aaron Bell. Tell us to the noes, Kirsty Blackman and Steve Bonner. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 340. The noes to the left, 263.
The ayes to the right, 340. The noes to the left, 263. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to Amendment 36 to Clause 9, which has been selected for separate decision, and I call Stephen Kinnock to move formally.
Formally, sir.
The question is that Amendment 36 be made. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye! Of the contrary, no. No! Division. Bills lobbies. Order. If members could resume their seats. The question is that Amendment 36 be made. As many of that opinion say aye. Or the contrary, no. No. Tell us for the ayes, Andrew Weston, Samantha Dixon. Tell us for the noes, Robert Largan, Aaron Bell. Lock the doors. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 263. The noes to the left, 339.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 263. The noes to the left, 339. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. The question is that clauses 9 and 10 stand part of the bill. As may I have been say aye? Aye. Or the contrary, no? Aye. Division, clear the lobby. Order. The question is that clauses 9 and 10 stand part of the bill. As may I have been say aye? Aye. Or the contrary, no? Tell us for the aye, Scott Mann, Mark Fletcher. Tell us for the noes, Kirsty Blackman, Steve Bonner. Lock the doors. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 340. The noes to the left, 264.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 340. The noes to the left, 264. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to new clause 8, which has been selected for separate decision, and I call Stephen Kinnock to formally move it.
Move formally, sir.
The question is that new clause 8 be added to the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Order. The question is that new clause 8 be added to the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. Tell us for the ayes, Andrew Weston, Samantha Dixon. Tell us for the no, Scott Mann, Mark Fletcher.
Fingertip control. Thank you. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 264. The noes to the left, 338.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 264. The noes to the left, 338. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill. As many other opinions say aye? Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. That concludes the proceedings of the House in Committee on the Safety of Rwanda, Asylum and Immigration Bill.
Order. Before I ask the Whip to report, it is with great sorrow that I inform the House of the death of Sir Tony Lloyd. He was a valued colleague who spent his life in public service. He'll be remembered on all sides of the House with respect and affection. I'm sure the House will join me in sending our sympathy to his family in their loss. There will be an opportunity for members to participate in a minute's silence tomorrow and to pay further tributes at a later date. So I want to do that.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know there'll be tributes in due course because many people in this House will want to speak in that session. But I'm grateful for this point of order just to say a few words about Tony and this terrible loss this afternoon. We are all deeply saddened at the loss of Tony. I spoke to him last Thursday when he left hospital for the last time to spend as much time as he could with his family and was able to pass on to him our thoughts, our respect, our affection for him, his commitment, his public service and, frankly, his sheer decency. I know that's not just felt across the Labour Party and the Labour movement, it's felt across this House and beyond. And can I just say thank you to those opposite who have sent messages. It is a great comfort to his family to know the respect that he was held in across this House. And our thoughts, of course, Mr. Speaker, this evening are with his family at this difficult time.
I say it. Minute silence tomorrow, and we'll give the House an opportunity for further tributes to be paid. Right. Order. Whip to report.
I beg to report that the committee has gone through the bill and directed me to report the same without amendment to the House.
Third reading. Minister. No. Well, we are. Minister to move the third reading. Right. Okay. Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I of course, echo the tribute to Sir Tony.
Should just let the room just clear. Yeah. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I, of course, echo the tribute to Sir Tony. And I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time. The Prime Minister, the Government, I have been clear that we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats. And we have, of course, been making progress on that pledge, reducing small boat arrivals by over a third last year. But to stop the boats completely, to stop them for good, we need to deter people from making these dangerous journeys, from risking their lives and from lining the pockets of evil, criminal, people smuggling gangs. The new legally binding treaty with the Government of the Republic
of Rwanda responds directly to the Supreme Court's concerns, reflecting the strength of the government of Rwanda's protections and commitments. This bill sends an unambiguously clear message that if you enter the United Kingdom illegally, you cannot stay. This bill has been meticulously drafted to end the merry-go-round of legal challenges. People will not be able to use our asylum laws, human rights laws, or judicial reviews to block their legitimate removal. And the default will be for claims to be heard outside of this country. Only a very small number of migrants who face a real and an imminent risk of serious and irreversible harm will be able to appeal decisions in the UK. And if... I will give way.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker, to the Home Secretary. As things stand, can the Home Secretary confirm that if this bill receives royal assent, that it will not breach international law? Yes or no?
My right honourable friend raises an important point and gives me an opportunity to be unambiguous and clear. As drafted, as we intend this bill to progress, it will be in complete compliance with international law. The UK takes international law seriously, and the countries that we choose to partner with internationally also take international law seriously. Because under our I will, and then I will make progress. Yeah.
The intervention just now was extremely apposite. Could the Foreign Secretary be kind enough to give me the advice as to why he said what he just said about no breaches of international law?
My honourable friend will know. My honourable friend will know that the government does not make its legal advice public. We have put forward, of course, an explanation of our position, but I am absolutely confident that we will maintain our long-standing tradition of being a country that not just abides by international law, but champions and defends international law. Under our new legislation, migrants will not be able to frustrate the decision to remove them to Rwanda by bringing systemic challenges about the general safety of Rwanda. I will.
I'm grateful to the Home Secretary, Mr. Speaker, but could you give us assurance that if this bill is passed tonight, there will be a system in place that will accurately test its success, month by month, week by week, so that we know all this anger, all this frustration, all this work is not for nothing?
Mr. Speaker, I think honourable gentleman speaks certainly for a number of people in the House, maybe not too many people on his own benches, because it certainly sounds as if he wants this to work. And I know there are plenty of people across the other side of the House who have tried to frustrate our attempts to deal with illegal migration. But we will, of course, want to assess the success, because we want to be proud of the fact that this government, unlike the parties opposite, actually cares about strengthening our borders and defending ourselves against those evil people smugglers and their evil trade. I want to make it clear that we will disapply the avenues used by individuals that blocked the first flight to Rwanda, including asylum and human rights claims, because without that very, very narrow route to individual challenge, we would undermine the treaty that we have just signed with Rwanda and run the very serious risk of collapsing the scheme, and that must not be allowed to happen. But if people attempt to use this route simply as a delaying tactic, they will have their claim dismissed by the Home Office and they will be removed. The bill also ensures that it is for ministers and for ministers alone to decide whether to comply with the ECHR interim measures, because it is for the British people and the British people alone to decide who comes and who stays in this country. The Prime Minister said he would not have included that clause unless we were intending and prepared to use it, and that is very much the case. We will not let foreign courts prevent us from managing our own borders. And, as reiterated by the Cabinet Office today, it is a responsibility, as the established case, that civil servants under the Civil Service Code are there to deliver ministers of the Crown's decisions. Mr. Speaker, the bill is key to stopping the boat once and for all. And to reassure some of the people who have approached me with concerns, I would remind them that Albanians previously made up around a third of small boat arrivals, but through working intensively and closely with Albania and their government, more than 5,000 people with no right to be here have been returned. And the deterrent was powerful enough to drive down arrivals from Albania by over 90%. Strasbourg has not intervened, flights from Rwanda have not been stopped, and the House should understand that this legislation, once passed, will go even further and be even stronger than the legislation that underpins Albania.
We obviously support the Albania agreement, but will he confirm that only 5% of Albanians who've arrived in the country over the last few years on small boats have actually been returned or removed? What's happened to the other 95%?
As I said, this is about deterrence, and the deterrent effect is clear for anyone to see. Over 90% reduction in the number of Albanians who have arrived in these shores because of the deterrent effect. And I'm glad that she chose this point to intervene, because it reminds me, of course, that the Labour Party have, of course, no credible plans at all to manage our borders. They have tried to obstruct our plans to tackle illegal migration over and over again, more than 80 times. They even want to cut a deal with the EU that would see us receive 100,000 extra illegal migrants each and every year, and they cheer. She's pleased with the idea that they're going to receive an extra 100,000 every year. They can laugh, but we take this issue seriously, because it is not what our country needs, and it is not what our constituents want. Mr. Speaker, we are united in the agreement that stopping the boats and getting Rwanda partnership up and running is of the utmost importance. And having a debate about how to get the policy right is, of course, what this House is for. That is our collective job, and I respect my good friends and colleagues on my side of the House for putting forward amendments in good faith in order to do what they believe will strengthen the bill. But, Mr. Speaker, whilst my party sits only a short physical distance from the parties opposite, the gulf between our aspiration to control our borders and their blasé, laissez-faire attitude to border control could not be more stark. Stopping the boats is not just a question of policy. It is a question of morality, and it is a question of fairness. And it is this government, this party, the Conservative Party, which is the only party in this House taking this issue as seriously as it should. I urge this House to stick with our plan and to stop the boats.
The question is that the bill now be read a third time. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first just add my tributes to Tony Lloyd, who did such wonderful work in policing as well as in this place. Mr. Speaker, what a farce today and yesterday have been. Just another day of Tory chaos and carnage. A Prime Minister with no grip, while the British taxpayer is continually forced to pay the price. Former Tory cabinet ministers, deputy chairs from all sides queuing up to tell us it's a bad bill, it won't work, it won't protect our borders, it won't comply with international law, it's fatally flawed. The only thing the Tories all seem to agree on is that the scheme is failing, the law won't solve it, and the Prime Minister is failing too, and they know it. A failing Rwanda scheme that's costing Britain £400 million, that sent more Home Secretaries than asylum seekers to Kigali, and that will only apply to less than 1% of those arriving in the UK. Less than 1%. The third Tory law on channel crossings in 2 years, it will get through tonight, just like the previous two did, even though they failed, just like the last two, a total con on the British people
And this chaos leaves the Prime Minister's authority in tatters. He's in office but not in power. No one agrees with him on his policy, and the real weakness is that he doesn't even agree with it himself. A Prime Minister who is so weak he's lost control of the asylum system, lost control of our borders, and lost any control of the Tory party. 60 Tory MPs voting against the government, 2 deputy chairs sacked, a Home Secretary and Immigration Secretary formally lost, Cabinet Ministers briefing openly they don't support the bill. The Home Secretary himself thinks it's batshit. The Prime Minister tried to cancel it, and yet, so weak, they're still going ahead. And under the Tories, we've seen border security weakened while criminal gangs take hold because they've not taken the action that we need. The backlog soar, the budget bust. Criminal smuggler convictions have dropped by 30%. Returns have halved. And instead of the practical plans that Labour set out to set up the new Returns and Enforcement Unit to stop the Home Office just losing thousands of people that it cannot keep track of, to stop the halving of the Returns Unit, to set up the new security powers to go after the criminal gangs, to stop this 30% drop in criminal gang smuggler convictions, and to have the additional cross-border police unit that we could be investing in if we weren't spending so much money on this failing Rwanda scheme. Because it's £400 million of taxpayers' money going to Rwanda, all without a single person being sent, all in addition to their whopping multi-billion-pound hotel bill. And of course, if they get flights off, it's probably another 10 to 20 million for every 100 people they actually manage to send. And President Kagame, an astonishing intervention this afternoon, saying he's happy for it to be scrapped and maybe offering to refund the money. Think what we could do with £400 million, Mr. Speaker. It's more than a third of the budget of the National Crime Agency. But the Kigali government have clarified the position this afternoon, and it's even worse. They've said, under the terms of the agreement, Rwanda has no obligation to return any of the funds paid. If no migrants come and the UK government wishes to request a refund of the portion of funding allocated to support, we will consider this request. Unbelievable. The government signed a deal, signed a whole series of cheques to send hundreds of millions of pounds of British taxpayers' money to Rwanda for a scheme they were warned would not work, that they were warned might be unlawful, they were warned would not work as a deterrent, and they were warned would be unenforceable and at high risk of fraud. Yet they signed it because they don't give a damn about taxpayers' money. And now they want to pass this bill and spend even more taxpayers' money on this failing scheme, a scheme which is only likely to cover less than 1% of the people who arrived in the country last year. Over 90,000 people who applied for asylum. And the Court of Appeal said Rwanda only had capacity for 100 people. The Immigration Minister admitted it's just a few hundred and not any time soon. And if they ever finally implement the Illegal Migration Act, that will immediately create a list of 35,000 people the Home Secretary is supposed to immediately send to Rwanda. And at this rate, it will take the government 100 years to implement their own failing policy. Although, to be honest, it is probably even worse than that, because they can't even find most of the 5,000 people that they put on the initial Rwanda list. Totally unbelievable. The Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, in the space of about 18 months, have literally lost 4,200 people they planned to send to Rwanda. I bet the Prime Minister wishes he could lose a few of those Home Secretaries he managed to send. And he did indeed lose his Immigration Minister. It's part of the chaos of the last few weeks and months. I give way to the former Immigration
for giving way. If she doesn't like the Rwanda policy so much, why did she brief the Times over the Christmas holidays that she was in favour of an offshore processing scheme, a scheme that everyone knows is more expensive than a scheme like Rwanda and has a far less deterrent effect? So it seems to be that everything that she doesn't like is her plan, except she didn't have the guts to put her name to it, so she briefed the Times anonymously.
Yeah. Nice try with total nonsense from the former immigration minister, who does have a history of making things up. Let's be clear. It's not clear that there's anything on the planet that is more expensive per person than the government's Rwanda scheme, £400 million, in order to send nobody to Rwanda and to totally fail. But look, the former immigration minister, I give him credit, he has exposed the real front bench plan, the real government's plan, the real Prime Minister's plan. It is just to try, in the former immigration minister's words, to try and get a few symbolic flights off before a general election with a small number of people on them, not to worry about handing over a small fortune to another country, not to worry about the fact that all this focus on one small failing scheme means they're failing to go after the gangs and they've lost thousands of people the Home Office should be tracking, not to worry about the fact that this new law is so badly drawn up that, frankly, they may be ordered by the courts to bring people back at further huge cost to the British taxpayer, turning the whole thing into an even bigger farce. That is not a workable policy. It is a massive, costly con. They're trying to con voters, trying to con their own party, but actually the fact is everybody can see through it now. He's a £400 million Rwanda scheme for a few hundred people is like the Emperor's new clothes. And the Prime Minister and his immigration ministers have been desperately spinning the invisible thread, but we can all see through it. The Home Secretary is just wandering naked round this chamber, waving a little treaty as a fig leaf to hide his modesty behind. I admit he doesn't have much modesty to hide. Mr. Speaker, there are things the Home Secretary and I agree on. We agree on working with France. We agree on the deal with Albania. We agree on the importance of stopping dangerous boat crossings that are undermining border security and putting lives at risk. And I think he probably agrees with us about the failings of the policy he is trying to defend today. We need stronger border security and a properly controlled and managed asylum system, so the UK does its bit to help those fleeing persecution and conflict, and those who have no right to be here are returned. We need Labour's plan for the new security powers, the new cross-border police, the new security agreement, the new returns and enforcement unit, the clearing of the backlog, the ending of hotel use, keeping track of the thousands of people that the Home Secretary has lost. But they'll get their law through tonight. This third new law in 2 years, the third Home Secretary to visit Rwanda with his chequebook, the third bilateral agreement with Rwanda. The Tory backbenchers have been saying it should be 3 strikes and you're out. Yeah. Well, we're now on 3, 6, 9 strikes and they haven't even got to first base. Because every time they bring forward a new law, it makes things worse. The first new law failed because the main provision's now suspended. The second new law failed, the main provision's not even implemented. Forgive us for not believing a word the government says and for voting against a third failing bill today. The only difference now is that none of their backbenchers believe them either. Broken promises on clearing the backlog, on ending hotel use, on stopping the boats, on returning people who come. It's chaos and failing on smuggler gangs, failing on returns, and failing to get a grip. Britain deserves better than this Tory asylum chaos.
Sir William Cash.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Very simply, I just simply reply to the Labour Party. We have no intention, certainly I have no intention, if I vote in this division this evening against this bill, to do any single thing to support their propositions as just put by their frontbench spokesman. I'll get that completely clear. They're not doing anything. They have no plan. I want this bill to succeed, and the sole reason why I shall be voting against this bill will be because, on third reading, I don't believe, to use the Home Secretary's own words, that this is the toughest immigration legislation that we could produce, nor do I think we've done whatever it takes. I can only say that in this context, but it's about the law. I am deeply worried, and this is my main concern, that there will be another claim which comes as a result of this. I don't think anybody expects anything else. And when it does happen, it will go to the Supreme Court, And when it goes to the Supreme Court, the question in front of that Supreme Court is going to be very, very simple. And I put this in my speech yesterday, and I don't retract a single word, and I'm extremely grateful for those people, very senior, and some members of the government, who said to me privately that they agreed with every word I said. And it is simply for this reason that I say this, that actually, if the Act of Parliament is sufficiently comprehensive, using the notwithstanding formula, and at the same time, the words used are clear and unambiguous, then there is no doubt at all that we will win that case in the Supreme Court. Sadly, I just don't think that that's going to happen. I explained yesterday why. There's no need or reason for me to go into it now. I've said what I've said, and all I can say is I wish the government well, but I do have to say that I can't support this in all conscience because I've set out my case and I'm not going to retract it on principle.
We come to SNP spokesperson Alison Poulos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The front page of this tawdry, pathetic piece of unworkable legislation says, in the name of the Home Secretary, I am unable to make a statement that, in my view, the provisions of the Safety of Rwanda Asylum and Immigration Bill are compatible with the Convention rights, but the Government nevertheless wishes the House to proceed with the bill. It is another illegal bill that will not work, will not fix the problem, and it is a bill for which this Government has no mandate. The 2019 Conservative Manifesto said, we will continue to grant asylum and support to refugees fleeing persecution with the ultimate aim of helping them to return home if it is safe to do so. Nothing about flights to Rwanda, nothing about extradition, nothing about ripping up people's fundamental human rights. Since then, there have been 2 unelected Prime Ministers, there have been 4 Home Secretaries and no mandate for this bill. The UNHCR also say that, and I quote from their assessment of this bill, it maintains the position that the arrangement now articulated in the UK-Rwanda Partnership Treaty and accompanying legislative scheme does not meet the required standards relating to the legality and appropriateness of the transfer of asylum seekers and is not compatible with international refugee law. Rwanda have been clear that they don't want to sign up to an agreement that breaches international law. This bill breaches international law. It is very clear, and it is very dangerous that the government is going down this road. We cannot make a country safe simply by legislating that it is so. It is a fantasy that this government is engaged with. And more dangerous than that, they ask the courts, they ask public servants, and they ask all of us to also engage in that same fantasy. It becomes upside down, topsy-turvy, that the right is wrong and wrong is right, and all of those things make no sense. You cannot make a country safe simply by legislating it so. And we know that it is no deterrent, because the supposedly harsh bills that came before have not been a deterrent either. It's been 181 days since the last tough, harsh, difficult, deterrent piece of legislation was passed, and those measures are not even yet in force from their previous tough, difficult, harsh bill that would be a deterrent. So we cannot believe them now. And you will also find that the tiniest number of people are actually going to be sent to Rwanda anyway. A tiny, less than 1% of the crossings this year would be sent to Rwanda. What happens to the rest of people left in immigration limbo to wander the streets of these islands? They can't say, they don't know, and they have no idea for what they will do when people have no rights and they are out looking for assistance. Mr. Speaker, this bill amounts to nothing more and nothing less than state-sponsored people trafficking. Far from, they don't like to hear it, but it is the truth. They don't like to hear it. And I will explain to them exactly why. Listen to my description and see what they think. Far from dismantling criminal gangs, this government has become the criminal gang, breaking international law, moving vulnerable people across the world without legal process, no right of appeal, no concern for the safety or human rights of asylum seekers, to a country they do not know, involving money and involving profit. It involves people. It involves people that this government will never meet, will never look in the eye, will never sit across the table and watch them in tears because they can't be safe. Robert Burns said, Robert Burns said, that great humanitarian of Scotland said, man's inhumanity to man make countless thousands mourn. I mourn what this government is doing to human rights, to the undermining of international law and international principles. And I give this assurance, when Scotland gets our independence, we will take our place in the world, we will take our responsibilities seriously, and we will play our full part in the world as an independent nation.
Sir Liam Fox.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin also by adding my tributes to Tony Lloyd, one of the most charming and civilised politicians in this House, a model that would do well to be replicated more widely than it sometimes is. It's very clear from the debates in the last couple of days that it is this side and this side only that understands the concept of deterrence when it comes to the honourable lady has had her hysterical say, I will have mine. When it comes to the importance of dealing with illegal immigration. And it's in stark contrast, I have to say, to the intellectual vacuum that now passes for today's Labour Party. On this side, the debate has been entirely about workability of the bill. And there have been some exceptional speeches, if I may single out my right honourable friend for Newark, in those debates in the past couple of days. Now, I don't believe that we should be demonising at any point those who want to get a better future for themselves by seeking asylum or migration to the United Kingdom, a fine, fair, tolerant society that anyone would want to come to. But the principle of territorial assignment, the right to access the national asylum system upon putting foot on land, has already had a coach and horses driven through it by the fact that many of these are not coming from a dangerous country by boat, they're coming from France. And that cannot be tolerated if we are to have control over our borders. And even more important, a point made very frequently by my right honourable friends, is the need to curb the evil of people smuggling and destroy the economic model of those who traffic in this most disgusting trade. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, political infringements of the ECHR are nothing to the duty to stop people suffocating in lorries or people drowning coming across the Channel, particularly when France is a country that is perfectly willing to ditch the judgments of the ECHR when it suits them, when it comes to deportation. Our deterrent will be even greater if we pass this legislation and can convince other countries to do the same in a synergistic way. Now, this bill may not be everything that everybody wants, but it is much better than what we have today. If I were only to have voted for legislation that I agreed with 100%, my voting record in the past 32 years may have been different from it is today. And I hear those in my own side saying, actually, we can replace this bill with something else. Well, we can't, Mr. Speaker. As you well know, Erskine May says, and I quote, when a bill has been rejected or lost through disagreement, it should not, according to the practice of Parliament, be reintroduced in the same session. This is the one chance that we get to pass this legislation. What we do will be judged by our voters according to their priorities. If we leave tonight with nothing, that judgment will be harsh, or worse, leave us to the cringing mediocrities that make up His Majesty's opposition.
Tony Lloyd, who I sat with for his last speech, which was in Westminster Hall, on human rights, on this very issue we're discussing now, and he spoke with such wisdom, and we will all miss him. I also am shocked to hear a member calling another member, female member, hysterical. It's a classic call-out of misogynistic term, and I was shocked to hear it, Mr. Speaker. So this is the third reading of the third bill to try and stop the Channel crossings in 2 years. The first, the Nationalities and Borders Act, has been partially suspended because it was making things worse. The second, the Illegal Migration Act, has mainly not been implemented because the Home Office believes it's unworkable. And so here we are for the third time. This is the fail again and fail harder version. Unaffordable, unworkable, unlawful. It weakens our national borders. It undermines international courts, those courts that protect and that we rely on as British citizens. And I've been very concerned about the attacks on the European Court of Human Rights during debates on this bill. And the costs are spiralling. £400 million plus £2.1 million already spent in legal bills alone by November 2023. This latest gimmick, not a plan, lets down people fleeing persecution and won't deliver on fixing the immigration system. It will leave nearly 100,000 cases in a backlog, 56,000 people in hotels, and, as we've now heard, more than 4,000 people missing from the system. It won't fix the system that the Conservatives have broken. It won't be that deterrent. It's too small and unworkable. It doesn't respond to the international situation with increasing climate change impact and conflict around the world that is driving people to seek safety. It feels like the Conservative Party can't cope with international reality and have stuck their fingers in their ears and are chanting something about Rwanda instead of facing up to reality. And this lets our country down. What will stop the boats and the dreadful deaths in the cold seas is Labour's plan. We will clear the backlog with a new fast-track system and 1,000 officers. We will end hotel use, saving the taxpayer over £2 billion, and improve enforcement with a new returns and enforcement unit to reverse the collapse in returns for those who have no right to be here. Look, the Conservatives started this by employing some temporary new officers, and it started working. So why not invest in things that work instead of this gimmick? They have started clearing their backlog. The Tories have also started smashing their gangs with work that they are doing in France. Again, it's beginning to work, so why not invest in those things that work, not the Rwanda plan? It's a nonsense to start something but not finish it and leave a half-baked plan in place. What works is smashing the gangs and working with France. We would smash the supply chains with new powers and a new cross-border police unit, which will stop the boats reaching the French coast in the first place. We would work in partnership internationally to address some of the humanitarian crises which are leading people to flee from their homes. We believe in strong border security and a properly controlled and managed and fair asylum system so that the UK will do our bit to help those fleeing persecution and conflict, but return those with no right to be here. And we believe in stopping the gangs, who are the only winners from this bill. Under the Tories, we just have costly chaos. Thank you.
So Therese Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important to speak in this bill today. I have to say I was somewhat astonished by the speech of the shadow Home Secretary, who can't even get the name of the country right, talking about the Kigali government. We're talking about Rwanda, a respected country that has recently been president of the Commonwealth. In that regard, though, Mr. Speaker, I also want to associate my comments with those respecting the sad loss of Sir Tory Lloyd. I'm conscious that both as Member of Parliament in both Manchester and Rochdale, that he was assiduous for his constituents, assiduous when he was in government, and he will be much missed from this House. The reason I stand today is that I am very keen to make sure that this bill gets through third reading with the largest majority possible, so that we can say to the other House, the elected House has had its say, and we're doing this bill solely because, having had excellent bill taken through by my right honourable friends, the members for Fareham and Newark, the Illegal Migration Act, which we should all remember, the Labour Party opposed religiously, blocked everything that we tried to do. But the Supreme Court, after disagreeing with the High Court, pointed to the issue about Rwanda specifically. And I think it's important that Parliament stands up, addresses that specific point, so that we can get through this stage and then commence the relevant sections of the Illegal Migration Act, particularly regarding having a safe third country. Now, I'm very conscious that temperatures are pretty high, but there is a genuine passion on this side of the House to respect the will of our constituents who want to see a fair, legal migration system and not this vague plan, which really isn't a plan by the Labour Party. But I want to say to my right honourable and honourable friends, do support this bill tonight so we have the biggest majority possible. And I point to clause 2 of the bill, where specifically it says in law, and I appreciate what other members have said, but it's very specific that when decision makers are making these decisions, that Parliament has given its full confidence that when people go to Rwanda, that they will be treated fairly, that the conventions will be applied, and then we will have that effective process, but also that effective deterrent, which I think actually the whole House seeks. So, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear, let's talk as one voice. I wish that the opposition would come on this side. I know from their track record of opposing the Illegal Migration Act that actually they might talk the talk, they're full of bluster, they don't really mean it, they don't really care. But I know that this Conservative government cares, I know that every Conservative MP cares, and we need to make sure that the Lords listen to the elected House.
I just want to say I'm personally gutted by the loss of Sir Tony Lloyd. He was a decent, kind, wise man and an excellent Member of Parliament, and we will all seriously miss him. As for this debate, they do say that the smaller the stakes, the more ferociously over which they are fought, and the small stakes are that 1% of the asylum seekers who come to this country might just, if this bill works, end up being sent to Rwanda at the cost of £240 million and counting. And we know it won't be a deterrent. We know that people have travelled from the Horn of Africa, as I said earlier on, and through Libya, through over the Mediterranean, through Europe, to that tiny fraction of people who end up trying to cross the English Channel, as if that will put them off, the 1% chance they may go to Rwanda, having taken all the risks they've taken to get as far as France. And of course people travel from France, because they're not going to sail directly from Libya, are they, for pity's sake? People will come from France. The French government could turn round to the Spanish and to the Italians and say, no, you're a safe country, stay there. You see where I'm going from all this. If we don't work cooperatively, then the whole thing falls down. The real issue is a 165,000 backlog of asylum cases that this incompetent government has failed to clear. The issue of deterrence I've already tried to cover, but one issue that I think will come about is that people may well decide, the people smugglers may well decide to bring people into this country, and they will simply go under the radar, not claiming asylum at all. So you won't reduce the number of people coming here, you will make sure it massively increase the number of people who end up in the black market, being in people trafficking, being victims of sexual slavery and so on. Only a quarter of those few people who are denied asylum, who do go through the system, only a quarter of them are actually removed by this government. So what we've got is a government that talks tough and acts weak. If you actually wanted a deterrent, then you'd make sure that there was a system that actually dealt with those 165,000 people, and you removed the ones who weren't genuine asylum seekers. Even the government's own figures, though, show that 75% of those people who come here claiming asylum are legitimate and genuine refugees. If you want to deter people, assess them, and then return the ones who are not genuine refugees. But the weakest thing of all about this bill is it's predicated upon the government's desire, because they think somehow the electorate likes this, that they would demonise those people who are the most vulnerable in the world. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that they have misunderstood and massively underestimated the British people, and certainly my constituents, who are better than they think they are. I can tell you about my community. 1945, half of the children who survived the death camps in Nazi-occupied Europe came to our shores. In fact, they came to the shores of Lake Windermere. They were the Windermere boys, the Windermere children, and we are proud of that legacy, because that speaks to the kind of people we are in the lakes and the kind of people we really are in Britain. When you speak to people, and I've visited some of the camps in Europe, when you visit people and you speak to those people who are seeking to come to the United Kingdom, and by the way, there are 19 European Union countries that take more refugees per head than the United Kingdom, which is an important thing to remember. When you talk to those people who do want to come here, what is it that drives them to come here? It's not benefits, it's not the NHS, it is a belief in Britain. They believe Britain is the kind of place where you can raise a family in peace, where you can earn a living, where you can have religious freedom and other liberties. And the thing is, that reputation is built on hundreds of years of experience, a proud experience of what it is to be British. Our forefathers and foremothers have built that reputation. It will take more than this tawdry government and this shabby piece of legislation to undermine that reputation overseas. They want to make Britain unattractive. They will fail. This bill will fail. It is a costly, expensive failure, and it deserves to be rejected by this House.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be quick, but it's been a very useful debate already, because we've heard from the opposition parties where they stand. We've heard from the SNP that they want Scotland to take its place among the nations of the world. What we didn't hear is whether they want to take Scotland to take its fair share of the refugees of the world, because so far they don't do it. And we heard from Labour, which was very good to hear, that they do in fact have a plan to stop the boats. It's our plan. It's everything that we're doing already, just without the Rwanda bit, which is the one essential piece of the jigsaw that will act as an effective deterrent and stop the boats. And I honour the honourable gentleman from the Liberal Democrats and his passionate speech there, but I think what he was saying is that we should just be more like Europe when it comes to refugees and asylum, and I'm not sure that's what the public want. Mr. Speaker, I just want to pay tribute briefly to a few people. The government whips, first of all, have done a brilliant job today. My congratulations to them, and I honour their efforts. They've been more successful than I have been today, but I'm very glad that we're all more or less united again as a party. Can I pay particular tribute to the Minister who has worked with colleagues across our party, across the House, in fact, to address the concerns that we had. And I'm pleased to say there have been some commitments today and in the last few days. I don't think they go far enough. And I want to just acknowledge the really important work that my honourable friends from Stone and from Newark have done through the committee stage of this bill, because I think that the amendments that they tabled and that so many of us have supported in the last 2 days would have made significant improvements to the operation of this bill. We are all on the same place, as many colleagues have said. We all want to do the same thing on this side of the House, which is to establish an effective deterrent that would ensure that people who are across the channel are immediately detained and removed. I don't think this bill is going to work as it's currently drafted, I'm afraid to say. I think that, in fact, we will see legal challenges that will clog up the process and ensure that the deterrent is not enforced. I regret that we are not honouring the trust that we had made to the people to effectively control our borders, which is what they voted for in 2016 and 2019 so decisively, and what all the opinion polls, all our constituents tell us, all common sense tells us, is such an essential part of our commitment and our responsibilities in government. And I regret that the essential principle of parliamentary sovereignty, while the bill pays tribute quite ostentatiously to the concept, does not in fact ensure that that is going to be the case. We believe that statutes passed in this place have supremacy over judge-made law and certainly over the jurisdiction of the European Court. And I'm afraid to say that the bill as it stands, much as the government agrees with the principle I've just established, the bill as it stands still allows lawyers to use foreign international law commitments and protocols to override the supremacy of Parliament, and I deeply regret this. My view is that we could have got a better bill through Parliament in this session. I think we could have developed it, and I understand it would have been possible to bring forward a bill of different scope that would have achieved the same ends. So I regret that we're not doing that, but I understand this is where we are. Many of my colleagues, and I honour them for their decision, have decided to vote with the government tonight because they don't want to cause the political disruption which a government defeat would ensue. I respect that greatly. I think that's a very honourable position. My view is, I said at the outset, that the bill needed these improvements. I don't think it'll work. I think we could have done better. Nevertheless, the fundamental fact is that we on this side of the House are united in our commitment to stopping the boats through this policy. The real division is not this gangway, it's that aisle. And the great value of the debates that we've been having is that it exposes the position of the parties opposite. They don't believe in stopping the boats, and we all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The tribute I received about Tony Lloyd today came from the ex-Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, who used to be the Deputy Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, and he said that Tony was one of the best people he had ever worked with, and so I stand here to say that. I want everybody in here to know that they are about to vote for a bill that they have absolutely no idea how much it's going to cost. Like, we haven't been given that information. I was in for the committee stage of the debate. Earlier, and the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee said that there was a view that each person that was sent to Rwanda would cost £169,000. And it piqued my anger so greatly because I had just come from an event with the Home Secretary around it being a year on from the independent child sexual abuse inquiry. and what progress we have made since then. And I was holding in my hand a piece of paper that said that in 2022, 100,000 children were sexually abused and came forward and said it. And then I looked up how much money the Home Office was allocating for their Sexual Abuse Against Children Fund in 2022. And it was £4.5 million, which I worked out was £42 for every child who'd been raped in that year. And I thought, what political capital of walking round and round and round and round for now the third bill for something that won't work. And 150 judges can be found yesterday under the, I don't know, the sofa by the Prime Minister when cases in my constituency of rape victims waiting 7 years to get in front of a judge. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, people who think that the amount of time spent on wasting taxpayers' money on something that hasn't worked the last 2 times we tried it and will not work this time, frankly, Mr. Speaker, should be ashamed of themselves for voting for something when they don't have any idea how much it's going to cost the people in their constituencies. I hope they feel shame for the amount of airtime and the amount who turned up today, but not for the victims of child abuse. Excuse me, would you like to intervene? No. The other thing I want to say is that I was in a British court last week, not a foreign court, a British court. I was in a British court with a victim of human trafficking. She'd been trafficked twice. We deported her once already as a trafficking victim, and she was re-trafficked back to this country. And I went to the upper tribunal with her last week. She has 2 children born of the repeated rapes that she suffered as a victim of human trafficking. And the Home Office was trying to deport her again, to which the judge scolded the Home Office lawyers for daring to bring it in front of them. And because I was sat in the courtroom, the Home Office lawyers were not so keen to give their evidence in front of me, so they didn't really give any. Yeah, I wonder why they didn't want to talk about how it was fine for a woman who'd been ritually raped repeatedly and repeatedly to have to go back to the country where that had happened and she had been trafficked to here. I have heard nothing today in any of the debates about when we scoop up all these people without any appeal, what happens to the victims of human trafficking? What happens to them? Because currently I've sat in courtrooms where this government is abusing them. I would never vote for this. Not today, and neither should anybody else.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was first elected to this House on the same day as Tony Lloyd in 1983. He was a brilliant friend, brilliant comrade, voted against the Iraq War, student tuition fees, and against the renewal of Trident, and was a brilliant Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, and he will be much missed by many good people all over this country. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is an appalling piece of legislation. It fails to take any account of the human suffering of people that are forced, through lack of any other alternative, to try to make a very dangerous crossing across the Channel. I have met people in Calais who are desperate, who are poor, are confused, have travelled from Afghanistan and other places. They are victims of war, of human rights abuse, and of poverty and so much else. The government is now claiming that the only way to deal with this is to attack what they euphemistically call as a foreign court, when in reality that court is the European Court of Human Rights, which is part of our judicial system, and that they are trying to offshore their obligations under international law and international treaties. Look at it on a global stage. It is the wealthy countries of the world, such as Australia and Britain, that want to offshore issues surrounding asylum and the rights of people to seek asylum and pretend that somehow or other they're doing the world a favour. We have to work with other countries to deal with the issue of the desperation of so many refugees in Europe, far more in other parts of the world. This bill blames those people for being victims, plays into the narrative of the most backward, horrible remarks made in our national media and national newspapers about asylum seekers, without ever recognising that those people that have sought legally to seek asylum in this country. It's always legal to seek asylum. That's there in treaty. Tomorrow, eventually, there'll be our doctors, there'll be our lawyers, there'll be our teachers, there'll be our engineers, as they are all over Europe. But it's playing into this sort of racist trope against refugees all over the world, and it is attacking refugees because of where they come from. And so I hope that the House tonight rejects this bill, but I hope in future we don't come back to this kind of debate. Instead, we start to look at the issues of human rights abuse, victims of war, victims of environmental disaster, and the needs of those people to be cared for on this planet as fellow human beings, rather than making them out to be the enemies they certainly are not. Desperate people are looking for a place of safety. Surely it's our obligation. The Home Secretary is getting very excited, but it's his obligation to try and make sure they do have a place of safety in which to survive for the rest of their lives.
Well, Brian, Mr. Speaker, I too pay tribute to Tony Lloyd. He was a far, far better man than most of us in this House, I think we would all admit. And those of us who have survived thus far advanced cancer often feel a particular poignancy. I know the Home Secretary will agree with this point, when someone is lost, a friend is lost to cancer. So my condolences go to his family, and I hope we will have a proper time to commemorate him, as you've said, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want the boats to stop, not because I don't value the lives of those who've paid thousands of pounds to risk their lives on the high seas in unseaworthy vessels, but because I do value their lives, because I despise the people traffickers, and because I don't want the generosity of the British people to be tested to breaking point. I'm voting against at third reading today for 4 reasons, though. First, I agree with the right honourable members, they're not all here now, I'm afraid, but for Newark, for Stone and for Devizes, this bill won't work. It's a false promise, and I'm sick of false promises. It's a waste of money, and I'm sick of the government wasting our money. And I'm very sceptical that it will actually act as a deterrent. After all, if the freezing waters of the Channel that can take a life in a matter of minutes are not a deterrent, how will a 1% chance of being transported to Rwanda act as a deterrent? Exactly. Second, this bill is based on a heady mixture of gross exaggeration, preposterous wishful thinking, and miserably misconceived machismo. Look at the exaggerations. The Right Honourable Member for Newark said yesterday, millions of people in the world want to make that journey in a small boat. Where on earth is his evidence for that? The Right Honourable Member for Fareham said that there are many instances of asylum seekers purporting to be homosexual to receive preferential treatment in asylum applications. Where on earth is her evidence for that? Many have claimed that the vast majority of those arriving in small boats are economic migrants. But the evidence is that when the Home Office has investigated, it has granted 65% of them refugee status. Third, the Right Honourable Member for Newark said yesterday that the law is our servant, not our master. But it is wrong that even without amendment, this bill places ministers above the law. It means, Mr. Speaker, that even if a dog is factually a dog, and a court, having interpreted the law, has adjudged it to be a dog, the government can declare it nonetheless to be a cat. The former Attorney General said earlier, quite rightly, that we rely in the UK on international law. It's the basis of how we protect ourselves and our interests. So how can we argue that China and Russia and the Houthis should not renege on international human rights law when we ditch it when it's inconvenient for us? And how many of us condemned Russia, quite rightly, when it declared by statute law that Luhansk and Donetsk were part of Russia when they are patently part of Ukraine, as laid down in international treaty? Fourthly and finally, Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Member for Newark said yesterday, we are not a parish council. I agree. So let's stop behaving like Handworth Handforth Parish Council. Let's behave like the House of Commons, protect ancient liberties, including the right to appeal, respect the rule of law and honour our international commitments, like honourable members.
Okay, well, the committee's gone through the House and it's not made any amendments, any of the varying and contradictory amendments from the varying and contradictory factions on the Tory parties. And what we're left with is a bill that in reality nobody actually wants. The hardliners on the Tory party right don't like it, something to do with foreign courts. The Tory left don't particularly like it because they realise how close it sails to breaching our international human rights obligations. The official opposition don't like it, I think, because it's too expensive. And on the SNP, we are opposed to this bill and the entire hostile environment policy in principle, because this is just completely the wrong way to deal with some of the poorest and most vulnerable people who come to these shores seeking refuge and safety. We want to welcome refugees and encourage them to contribute to our economy and society. But, Mr. Speaker, it seems even the Republic of Rwanda is getting cold feet, and no wonder, notwithstanding the fact that the United Kingdom continues to grant asylum to asylum seekers from Rwanda. Why should a country that aspires to be a prosperous, stable African democracy allow itself to become a political football for wannabe leaders of the opposition who currently inhabit the Tory benches? According to the Prime Minister today, the best, or perhaps the worst thing about Rwanda is that it is not the UK. And the very fact of not being the UK is a deterrent for people to come here because they might be deported to it. So by the same logic, if the government threatened to deport people to Disneyland, that would also be a deterrent because Disneyland is not in the UK. Now, of course, Disneyland is a place where dreams are supposed to come true, but I think the former Home Secretary and indeed the former Immigration Minister's dreams of flights taking off to Rwanda are not going to come true, and neither are their dreams of becoming the next leader of the opposition after the election. But the dream on these benches of an independent Scotland, the dream which will never die, of an independent Scotland that has its own independent, humane asylum system which recognises human rights and wants to welcome refugees, that dream will come true, and sooner rather than later, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the bill now be read a third time. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. And the contrary, no. No. Division, clear the lobbies. The question is that the bill now be read a third time. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No. The tellers for the ayes are Mark Fletcher and Scott Mann. For the noes are Sam Dixon and Andrew Weston. Lock the doors! Order.
The ayes to the right, 320. The noes to the left, 276.
The ayes to the right, 320. The noes to the left, 276. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Look! I'll just let the chamber clear and then we'll...
Thank you, that's a good idea.
Nobody's objecting.
Right. I think that's it.
I'm going to put motions 3, 4 and 5. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is, that's on the order paper. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is, this House do now adjourn. Simon Jupp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to have secured today's important adjournment debate on hospice funding in Devon. I welcome the Minister and colleagues to this debate. A few years ago, at a dinner hosted by the Rotary Club of Exeter, I was sat between the Bishop of Exeter and Dr. John Searle, the founder of Hospice Care, a brilliant local independent charity providing specialist care to people across our county. I must confess, it was a surreal experience for this 30-something-year-old from Devon who is more comfortable in a pub, not black-tie dinners. They both spoke to me about local hospice services and the good work they do in Devon. Dr. John Searle sadly passed away last year, and I'd like to pay tribute to his work, his compassion, and his determination. Our society will be so much better off if we had more people like John, and I'll always treasure the conversation we enjoyed. Hospice services in Devon provide incredible support and comfort to those suffering from a terminal or long-term life-limiting condition. Patients often have multiple conditions and complex needs, and often require a high level of support. And as the member for East Devon, I'm acutely aware of the work and impact of hospices locally. Across East Devon, several charities provide hospice services, and I want to pay tribute to the ones based in my constituency: Sidmouth Hospice at Home and Hospice Care. Sidmouth Hospice at Home has a day centre in Sidford and a 24/7 specialist nursing team working with local NHS dementia services teams who benefit from the use of their building. I live in Sidmouth. They do us proud. I'll give way.
Devon. I'm sure you could do something that does relate to funding in Devon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Honourable Gentleman is right to refer to the hospice funding in Devon as it's put forward. But just to say this, Mr. Speaker, while the hospice funding and the charity giving in Devon is good, could I suggest to him that perhaps in Strangford it may even be better? Each year in Northern Ireland, our fundraisers add £15 million to the 4 hospices, and without this, the hospices couldn't function. Does the Honourable Member not agree that government must stop relying on people's charity to fill the gap and increase funding immediately to meet that need? I know his charity givers in Devon do well, but the ones in Strangford do equally well. Thank you.
Thank the Honourable Gentleman for his point. One of the points he raised with me earlier, because he told me he was going to intervene on me, was about fundraising, and that's been really difficult since COVID for all sorts of reasons. But across our rest of our part of Devon, Hospice Care runs hospices at Highview Gardens in Exmouth, Searle House in Exeter, and has a fantastic clinical nurse specialist team in Budleigh, Salterton, Exmouth, and further afield in neighbouring constituencies. Hospice Care is the biggest of the local charities that supports 2,500 people each year. But these charities need dedicated teams and a lot of funding to support many thousands of patients. And funding matters even more because, as we know, Devon's population is ageing and growing. In Devon, there are proportionally more older people than the national average. More than 25% of the total population in the Devon County Council area is aged over 65, compared to less than 1 in 5 of the total England population. 14% of these people are 85 and over. By 2040, Devon's population, aged between 65 and 84, is predicted to increase to 225,000, a 27% rise, and the 85-plus population will nearly double to 56,000. Hospices across our county are therefore playing an increasingly key role. Now, I was reminded of the importance... I will give way.
Thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and he's right to highlight the future challenges for hospices. Would he agree that plans like coming forward from Rowcroft Hospice in my own constituency to very much integrate and provide both nursing and sheltered accommodation alongside the hospice services they will continue to provide show a way to actually generate additional income whilst not conflicting with their core purpose?
I completely agree with him. These services are dynamic, they are working, and the people of Torbay are well served.
Now, I was reminded of their increasing importance by Dr. Timothy Dudgeon, a constituent of mine in Ottery St Mary. He first approached me 2 years ago, and we met at one of my regular surgeries in Exmouth shortly afterwards. His plea was simple. Hospice care, one of the charities I've mentioned, needs fairer funding from the NHS in Devon to cope with growing demand. Now, I fully agree with him, but here we are, 2 years later, because the NHS in Devon simply aren't listening. I've raised the matter through meetings, letters, and everything else to the NHS Integrated Care Board, or ICB for short. And I'm taking my call to the floor of this House because I want the chair of the ICB, Dr. Sarah Wollaston, formerly of this place, to realise that I'm not letting this unfair deal for Devon's hospices go without challenge. The issue here is obvious to all, and the solution is simply common sense, something we ought to try a little more often. Hospices across our country and county are facing a perfect storm. Income from fundraising is falling, while costs and demand for their services are rising. Hospice Care in Devon has told me they are facing a £2.5 million deficit in the next financial year. Meanwhile, Sidmouth Hospice at Home has told me their average caseload has risen by over 50% in the last year alone. Amid this perfect storm, I've been calling on the NHS Devon ICB to increase their funding for all of our hospices. Now, ICBs, Integrated Care Boards, are responsible for determining the level of funding for palliative and end-of-life care in their area. It's devolution, I support it. The government doesn't decide how funding is spent. Local organisations should know their area best and where to send their money. I question this in Devon. If the ICB needs more money to achieve fairer hospice funding, I would bang down the door of any minister to help them if asked. But they haven't, and we faced a wall of silence. That was, intriguingly, until a couple of hours ago, when I received a letter from NHS Devon ICB. Intriguing timing, do we not think, given they didn't reply to previous letters I've sent last year. Now they have finally responded to one of my letters from November. NHS Devon ICB saying they're working on plans to move towards more equitable NHS funding starting in the next financial year. I'm sure colleagues here will be pressing for more details about that. And the wall of silence we've all faced in Devon is why I've launched a campaign and petition on my website to put pressure on the ICB to increase funding to our local hospices, which residents from across my constituency of East Devon and beyond are supporting. I first raised this with NHS Devon ICB 2 years ago, after I met with Dr. Timothy Dudgeon. I really hope the Minister can support my message to the ICB and its chair, Dr. Sarah Wollaston, and my message is crystal clear. There needs to be a fairer deal. Hospice care is funded for 18% of their costs from NHS Devon ICB, compared to the national average of 37% from ICBs across England. Sidmouth Hospice Care at Home receives no funding from the NHS in Devon at all, and that puts them in a small minority in the country, receiving no money from a local NHS body. That simply cannot be right. I will give way.
Richard. I'm grateful to the honourable member, both for giving way and also for securing this debate this evening, which is a really significant one. I know from Seaton Hospital League of Friends, where there is the Seaton Hospice at Home facility, that the palliative care nurses who work there are amazing people, and they help people to die in a very dignified fashion. So, given that we have such fantastic people who work for such organisations as Hospice at Home in Seaton and Sidmouth, does he think that they ought to continue to have a physical location in which to work from, as they do currently at Seaton Hospital? And would he agree with me that the Minister might do well to talk to NHS Property Services so that they can continue to have that facility at Seaton Hospital?
Gentleman, for his intervention. He makes a very good point about Seaton Hospice Care at Home, and they do a fantastic job for the residents of Seaton and the Collie Valley around the area. I think he also makes a really good point about Seaton Hospital, which of course we face challenges with locally. He knows all too well as the member for Tiverton and Honiton. And I think one thing that is really important to recognise is that obviously NHS Property Services is an arm's length body Having said that, recent meetings with one of the ministers who has sponsorship of NHS property services does show some light to try and make sure that that building, Seton Hospital, is protected for future generations. But I want to speak about somewhere else in Devon for a second, because the honourable member for North Devon can't be here. I'm told North Devon Hospice has been trying to get its hospice at home service commissioned for a decade. A decade. And the ICB agrees it should be, but will still not fund the service, which saves North Devon District Hospital £2.7 million in avoided admissions. Similarly, the members for South West Devon and Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport have raised the same issues with St Luke's Hospice in Plymouth too. This is plainly unfair. Now must be the time to strengthen our hospices, give them fairer funding and help them take pressure off the NHS. I will give way.
I'm very grateful for bringing the adjournment debate, Mr Speaker. In terms of the threats faced by the charitable palliative care sector, I think they're not only emulated in East Devon, but even in my own constituency. I have two of the largest hospices in Scotland, St Margaret's Scotland and Whitecrook, and also the Children's Hospice in Bala. But the big challenge has been how to be taken seriously by NHS managerial structures. And whilst I have two very and very well committed palliative care structures in these two charities, sometimes the biggest challenge has been them being taken serious by, well, as we would say, community health partnerships, or as these integrated care boards in his area.
And he's hit the nail on the head, I think. He's absolutely right. Now must be the time to strengthen our hospices, give them fairer funding, and help them take pressure off the NHS. And hospice care has calculated that its services save 2 to 3 hospital admissions every day. These are patients the local NHS would have to cover if the hospice has to cut its services. Sidmouth Hospice at Home has calculated that they are saving NHS locally more than 1,300 nights of hospital stays through preventing admission, shortening stay lengths and speeding up discharges. Isn't this what we want? The benefits of fairer funding are plain to see. Strengthening our local hospices takes pressures off our NHS, but without fairer funding, and given the perfect storm of less fundraising income, more costs, more demand, there is a real risk they may have to cut vital services without it. Now, this includes inpatient beds and specialist community nursing provision. This cannot be allowed to happen. That is why I urge NHS in Devon to listen to the case I have made today and the Minister to back my call. It is high time for fairer funding for our brilliant hospices in Devon.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I would like to thank my honourable friend